Alright, right now it's April 4th, 2007. Mom's visiting from South Africa, and we're in Augusta, Georgia. We're at Neil's place right now. And it's kind of late at night. We've been running around. We were in Atlanta today. We went to see the aquarium yesterday. We ran around all over Atlanta today. So we're a little bit tired at this point, but I'm going to go ahead and do some interviewing of Mom, because I want to document some of this fun stuff that she has done. Alright.
Alright, hi folks. Okay, now why don't you just ask me some questions?
Okay. Sure. Well, let's start about which was the first ballet company you were in, and how old were you?
Okay. When I signed my first contract with Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, 1956, I was 16, and I turned 17 during that first tour with Ballet Russe. Back in those days, it was a bus tour, one-night stand bus tour, which that actually means you're bus touring for 9 months, and you have 1 month off in Chicago. Christmas was in Chicago. That, snow and the whole works. It was nice at the Opera House. But the company at the time was, as I remember, it was about 35 dancers. And then you had another maybe 30 musicians. And so you had a musician's bus and a dancer's bus. And then you had 3 18-wheelers that hauled scenery and costumes and sets. And actually they had lights too, because not all the places we played were very well equipped.
Really?
Yeah. And we would start off and just be on tour for 9 months. We had performance every night, 6 nights a week, plus a matinee and evening on Saturday and Sunday. And we would then, Monday was always dark night, and actually once in a while we had to travel on dark night. We got paid extra money for it, so we could sleep on the bus while we traveled a long trip.
Was it worth it, the extra money?
Well, anything was worth it, because we were paid very, very little. I think
really?
The salary at that point, as I recall, it was $86 a week.
$86
a week, and rehearsal salary was half that.
Did you keep an apartment anywhere?
Well, sometimes, and we would go together, 3 of us or 2 of us, and same thing, 2 or 3 people in the girls in the corps de ballet would room together, and the guys, to cut down expenses. But
would you keep it year-round?
We paid our own. No, well, we would like to, and some of us, if we could swing it financially, did. Sometimes we would have an apartment and then give it up. We were renting anyway, and just have it for the break between tours, and then give it up. And that would be when you rented furnished apartments. There were many different systems, but we paid our own hotel and our own restaurant food. There was no other way. So, and then we had on these great big 18-wheelers for personal use.
Wait a minute, you paid your own hotel on the road?
Yeah.
They didn't put you up in hotels. You personally, out of your $86 you were paid, you had to pay your own hotel bill?
Of course.
And they didn't feed you?
No, they didn't feed us. We had to pay our own food.
Wow.
You see? You couldn't save anything.
Yeah.
You really couldn't.
So the $86 was really more of just a per diem to keep you on the road.
Well, so that we would eat, so we would have energy to dance.
Yeah.
Well, no one ever did it for money. And then there was this awful thing where, I know when I signed my contract, I signed another little piece of paper. I didn't know what I was signing. They didn't report your whole salary to the Social Security people, so that when you actually retired umpteen thousand years later and were going to apply for Social Security, you didn't get credit for those years. And I only found that out recently when I applied for my Social Security.
Wow.
They really messed up with all the relationships with the dancers. They just used them. The problem was the dancers loved to dance, so they would do it free of charge maybe, or almost free of charge, which was practically what we did really. Just because we loved to do it. That's what we loved to do most of all. And the management of Ballet Roost in Monte Carlo took big advantage of that. But anyway, on this 18-wheeler, for our personal use, there were big trunks, big wooden trunks, and they would transport. Each person had a steamer trunk that was piled into that, and about once every 3 or 4 weeks we would stay maybe 2-3 days in a city, and they would unload the trunks, and we knew we could go into our trunks and get a change, you know, if we needed summer clothes now, you see, and we'd been touring through snowy regions, we could put our snow clothes back in and take summer clothes out. So you had a little more packing space than just your suitcase. There was also big wooden crates that had like shelves with your theater case. And a theater case is a little black box about so big. And you had your rehearsal clothes in there and your performance tights, your pink performance tights. And then another box everybody had a fishing tackle box, which they used for their makeup. And these boxes would fit into the wooden cases. Now, then what we would do is buy, you know, those plastic boxes with little divisions for fishermen use for flies? Okay. We would buy our makeup and then melt it or just glob it into these little compartments so that we had just a thing, open it up, and now you have all your colors and everything. And then your max factor. I don't know what they use now. I'm sure it's different now. But that's what we would use. And that would also go into the makeup box and the brushes and your things. You know, it was a theater makeup, opera house makeup under intense lights. And it looked kind of funny up close. But you need it to stand up at any distance under intense light. And it takes a while to learn how to do it, too. I looked pretty funny for the first, I would say, 6 or 8 months. Because everybody they took the new people in the company, they would say, oh, let me show you makeup. Come, let me show you. And some of the men dancers would show me, and I would come out looking like them, you know, on my face. Or the dancer, the soloist would take me in, oh, Hester, you know, I'll do one side and you do the other side to match, and I come out looking like that person. It takes a long time to learn how to do it yourself. But eventually I picked it up. It's a lot of fun, makeup, stage makeup, and character makeup is fun too. If you get to play a part where, you know, you're an evil person or you're an old granny or you're not always a beautiful princess or a snowflake or something like that. You get to do all kinds of things like that. But we would tour this during the one-night stands means that you get on the bus at 8 in the morning and nobody calls you. You got to do it yourself. Means you had breakfast before. So you're up at 6, pack up your suitcase and eat breakfast, and on the bus travel until around 1 or, it depends on how far, but 1 or 2 o'clock. Get off, check into the hotel, grab some dinner. Dinner is around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, maybe a little earlier. And then you have to get yourself to the theater. And sometimes the bus would take us to the theater if it was very far from the hotel. Other times we would all chip in together for a taxi or something. There would be some way to get ourselves to the theater. Then you very often have to go and do some warm-up and rehearse a couple of hours. Then you go up to the dressing rooms and rest a little bit and do your makeup for the evening, for the first ballet, you know. And each ballet, if you have 4 ballets in an evening, you could easily have 4 different makeups. But anyway, your makeup and fix your hair and the headdress. And then you go down on stage, and they usually had company class for probably an hour, because you've already rehearsed and done a lot of other things. And then curtain was usually either 8 or 8:30. And you do the performance and finish around 10:30 or 11. And there were times when the musicians union got very annoyed because the performance would go past the regulation. I think the regulation was 11, and the company, Ballet Russe anyway, wouldn't pay overtime to the musicians. So the musicians in the middle of the last ballet would just put down their instruments and walk off. You know, and there we are in mid whatever on stage. That happened a couple of times, and they got some union negotiators together. And I don't know exactly what happened. This was a long time ago. How they solved it. They certainly didn't do that in Chicago. You couldn't do that. The biggest. Yeah, we were all over the country. But anyway, I'm losing my thread. Okay. You have your performance and you finish, let's say 11 o'clock. Now you got to find a little bit of food. Not a heavy dinner, but you want some even cornflakes and milk or little scrambled eggs, something like this. And often enough, nothing was open. And this was really before McDonald's and all the fast food places. Sometimes, especially I remember in the West, there's nothing open but the corner bar, but we would go in, a group of us, 6 or 8 dancers, and in a little town like that, everyone knew that Ballet Russe was in town, so they would know who we were, and they would whip up a little something for us, and that was nice. And go back, sleep, up at 6, on the bus at 8, do the whole thing over again. That kind of touring is very, very, very difficult to keep your technical edge up. It's about impossible. So that was why I stopped. I was with Ballet Russe for 3 years, and I stopped. I left them with the idea of joining New York City Ballet, which was a company much more dancer friendly, and you stay in one. You perform in New York City most of the time. And in the summer, you spend 2 weeks at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles, or there's a theater outside, an amphitheater outside of Chicago. I don't remember the name now. And Bear Mountain up near New York City. And you spend 2 or 3 weeks in each one of these places. You don't have to do this 8 o'clock in the morning on the bus every time. And New York City Ballet used to either take a train from east to west coast when they traveled, or fly. And it was with New York City Ballet that I went to Europe for the first time, and what was then Soviet Russia, Soviet Union.
Were you paid any more?
Yeah, the salary was better, and they cared for the dancers much better. But Mr. Balanchine was a very demanding choreographer. But the dancers were able to keep their technique up because they were given classes, given time to rest, although they had very heavy rehearsals. We weren't. Lincoln Center wasn't built yet. This was
Neil Wagner, everyone. Neil Wagner, trying to stay out of shot.
What is he doing? He's tired. I was trying to. He can hardly stand up.
You can get in shot. It's all right.
Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo used you guys horribly.
Well,
yeah,
it's true.
That's what it sounds like to me.
They didn't pay you any salary. It was slavery.
Well, sort of.
They pay you $80-some a week, and you have to pay your own food and get the money together to get a taxi to go from the hotel to the place.
Well, we would get 4 of us.
I hope they go to ballet hell.
Well, they did. They stopped producing in 1956.
I hope they're doing one-night stands for the rest of eternity.
Sergei Denham, the director? He probably is. I don't know. It's too bad. It's too bad. It's true. But New York City Ballet was a good place to work. That was very good. In fact, to this day, I am on their alumni email list, which is a lot of fun because I get notices of special performances that they're doing at Lincoln Center, and I also find out when all my old buddies are busy. They're all teaching here and there, you know. Or some of them are teaching dance history. Some of them, Suki Shore, my old roommate, is head of the American School of Ballet, which is the school connected with New York City Ballet.
Okay.
She has been for years. Yeah, she's very bright and very strong, you know. Woof. And once in a while, Pat Neary, another friend of mine, comes to Cape Town or to South Africa anyway to stage ballets on the companies there. She specializes in staging Balanchine's ballets. I was trying to. Anyway, we saw her a few years ago when we were still living up near Joburg.
Mm-hmm. Where else did the New York City Ballet take you? You mentioned you went to Europe.
Well, that particular tour started in Germany. We went all through the German opera houses and ended in Vienna. And we went from Vienna to Moscow. And we opened in Moscow. And as I said, that was 1962. And it was heavily communist at that point, you know. It was fascinating to see. And we were there, I think it was 3 weeks. We opened at the Bolshoi, and then we went to the theater in the Kremlin. And then we closed weeks later at the Bolshoi again. But the Bolshoi has its own company, so we couldn't do the whole season there.
Sure.
And the audience welcomed us, but you know, the Russians always love ballet. No matter what the government is doing, they really, they just like in the USA, people line up around the block for basketball tickets. People do the same thing in Russia. Well, so we went from Moscow up to what was then Leningrad, St. Petersburg, and while we were there, you know, all of my teachers were from Russia. There were Russians that escaped at the revolutionary time and came to, first Paris was the stop for them, first stop, and then they came to the USA. And the teachers that I worked with in both Cleveland, Ohio, and New York City were all from the St. Petersburg, from the Mariinsky Theater, which is the same, well, they've just renamed Leningrad and the Kirov Theater. I mean, it's still the old Mariinsky, and it's now, again, being called the Mariinsky Theater. Anyway, I saw a whole wall of graduation photos of the various classes throughout the years, and I saw the graduation photos of my teachers. It was amazing, you know, all, you know, around the turn of the century, a little bit before, a little bit later. Of course, the Russian Revolution was 1917, so they escaped about that time. That's when Mr. Balanchine also left Russia, went to Paris, went out to Hollywood, choreographed a few movies, came back to New York City, and Lincoln Kirsten, a very wealthy fellow who loved ballet, agreed to back New York City Ballet for him. That's how it got started. And they had the Ballet Society from about 1938, 39, and then about 5 years later started actually New York City Ballet from that background. But they built up a school before that, so they had a good school to draw from. They were very systematic about it, and I think that's a quality that company has always had, and that's why they could be dancer friendly and have healthy dancers and give them marvelous productions to do. Anyway, so I was there for 4 years, and then I had already, of course, by then hooked up with Richard Wagner, and he was with American Ballet Theater. And I was kind of tired of the Balanchine scene, just only one choreographer. So I went over to American Ballet Theater and asked if they needed a dancer, another dancer. And Lucia Chase, who was then owner and director of it, said, yes, come, because the people begin to know you after a while. And so I joined American Ballet Theater, and I was there for about a year and a half, but it was back on the bus. And I didn't want to do this bus touring bit. A lot of marvelous repertoire, you know, Billy the Kid. They had a version of Les Sylphides that I loved. I also did that same ballet in Ballet Russe. It was one of my very, very favorites. Another very favorite ballet of mine is Serenade, which was Balanchine Ballet, New York City Ballet. Anyway, marvelous repertoire in American Ballet Theater, but bus touring again, and very limited choreography. I was interested in new choreography. You know, let's get some choreographers that are alive here. Let's not keep doing Petipa and Fokine, some of the old guys. Of course, Balanchine was alive, but he was doing sort of the same thing over and over again. So Harkness Ballet was just starting. Rebecca Harkness, who is the Standard Oil heiress, wanted to start a company. She loved ballet. She actually had a private ballet class 3 or 4 times a week under a relative of Fokine's. I've forgotten his first name. And she had her own accompanist, but that was her private business. In the meantime, she started a ballet company, and at that time, they were just beginning to meld the old classical ballets with a little more modern dance. And that was very interesting. They were extending the classical idiom. And that's a lot of what Harkness Ballet was about. And I did join them. I was there 6 years. Again, it was not bus touring, which is nice. But we had some New York seasons. We did. Most of the time, we would go over to Europe. We would rehearse for a couple of months in the south of France, in Cannes, or sometimes we would in Monte Carlo, which was nice. And then we would go on tour through Europe and kind of...
How rigorous were your rehearsals in Cannes?
You start out at 10 o'clock with ballet class, 10 till 11:30 every day. Then you have a half an hour to relax a little bit, have some water, probably change your practice clothes because everything is all sweaty. And then you could rehearse, let's see, 10 to 11:30, 12, rehearse until 2, maybe 3, have something to eat, and continue rehearsing until 5 or 6, depending upon what. And then the evenings were off.
What would you do?
Oh, not a whole lot. You're pretty tired after that, believe me. You're pretty tired. Depends on how much rehearsal. Some ballets have 4 people, some ballets have 16 people. Sometimes you would do a short solo in the middle of a ballet, and you would just be there, or they would spend an hour just working on your solo. Or if you were doing a principal part, the pas de deux, whatever, you worked hard. And then there were sometimes solo rehearsals in the evenings, but not usually. So we would be rehearsed, then we would take it on tour throughout Europe, all over France, up and down Italy. We never went to the UK. I'm sorry, I've never been there, and I feel we never did.
And how long would that whole cycle be? A couple months, you said, and rehearsing,
and then take it on tour. Take the ballets on tour, kind of try them out, and then take them to the USA, to the really bigger cities. But I mean, heavens, we were at the Comédie Française in Paris. That was the theater and there in Vienna we were in, and I can't remember the name of the theater, but it's a little theater by the river there that Mozart had a lot of his performances in. It was wonderful, a lot of history, but I'm telling you, especially that old theater, well, and in Portugal as well, in Lisbon, those floors were like 500 years old, and big splinters and all rutty, and a lot of them they use them to present operas when we're not dancing or people are not dancing, and they have these big trap doors that, you know, in the middle of Wagnerian operas, a trapdoor can, and up comes the steam, and up comes some kind of singers, you know, singing away. Well, we had to dance over that. And at that time, they didn't have what they call a battleship linoleum.
Mm.
But in the years I was with Harkness, after years they invented that, and battleship linoleum. In fact, I'm thinking was it Harkness? Yeah, it was during Harkness time, and the battleship linoleum was long strips, about so wide, of linoleum that rolled up, and they would lay it down on the stage crew, and then tape it together. And it would at least provide a fairly smooth surface, so that, and a lot of our work, you know, you fall down on purpose, you're up, you're around. I mean, you don't, splinters and big splinters in your point shoes, this is bad news. I remember one rehearsal where Brian McDonald was choreographer and director at that point, and he was a sadist if there ever was one. But people were marking this particular ballet called Time Out of Mind. Marking them meant that they were rehearsing it and not doing it full out. And the reason was the stage. It was in Portugal, in Lisbon, and the stage, they hadn't laid the linoleum yet. So people didn't want to get on the floor and slide. There were a lot of slides. And he blew a gasket. And he says, no marking, no marking. And it took particularly one dancer, one of the girls and her partner, and made them demonstrate this thing where he throws her down and spins her around and up again and drags her off stage. And she's crying in the wings, and she had to go to the hospital to get the splinters dug out of her. The guy, it was nuts. He used to say he was only happy if he made somebody cry every day. And he tried his pressure on me, but it didn't work.
Of course.
Well, it didn't. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not some kind of idiot like that. But fortunately, not very many of the directors were like that. No. But the battleship linoleum was a great advantage. It's one of those things that finally came up. Let's see. Where shall I go from here? We're touring. We're touring all over the world. We've got...
Was that the final company you were involved with?
Yeah. I was
Okay.
first soloist with them when I decided that was enough.
How old was Neil? Yeah.
Well, that's it. Neil was, 3 and a half, 4.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to have to go to school. I was 30, and I started to get little injuries. You know, my back would just go out. I remember I woke up one morning, and this was in Indianapolis, and we had rehearsed hard. And there's a nice theater there at the university, nice big stage, beautiful. But I woke up and I couldn't, my head was flopped over and I couldn't command anything, you know. And so I called the manager, one, you know, in the company, one of the people on tour with us, not a dancer, and we went to the hospital, and the doctor looked, and he said, he didn't know what to do, but he would give me a muscle relaxant. I don't know what good that was supposed to do. But mainly, I stayed in bed for about 2 days, and just let everything fix itself. It was still another week or so before I felt really right. But, you know, after all those years of dancing, you can sort of make do. If this set of muscle doesn't work, you use something else to compensate, which is exactly what I'm doing now with this knee that I'm having a little problem with. So I managed to get through the performances that I had to do. I just missed a couple. But then, you know, the little things would happen. And I thought, no, the old body's not the one to do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, the next problem is that, okay, if I quit Harkness Ballet, and I had met Ken. Richard, my first husband, was by then in Europe already.
Mm-hmm.
And I was leaving the theater world, and now I had to start at the position of most people starting after high school. You know, go back to age 18 practically, just at the bottom of the ladder again. And I found a job. I couldn't find a teaching job. That's what I wanted.
I'm surprised about that. You'd think that
Well,
with your background.
there are umpteen thousand teachers and ballet teachers in New York City, and I wanted in New York City.
Yeah.
So I worked for Manya Khan while Ken was doing pre-med. It was 3.5 years, I think he did pre-med, which was teaching very wealthy fat ladies exercises. But you know, it was good because I learned how to work with non-dancers.
Uh-huh.
I really did. I also learned a very good system of exercise corresponding with breathing. It's a good thing to learn about. And dancers, you know, they don't talk. You're not encouraged to talk. You don't talk during ballet class. If you wish to ask a question, you can wait until a quiet moment and put your hand up and say something, or come quietly forward. You do not talk. So you don't develop all those muscles. And at Manya Khan's, you had to give the class verbally, and each class was an hour, and you did between 6 and 7 classes a day. And by the end of the first week, I couldn't talk. I just lost my voice. So there was another one of the exercise teachers who was actually an opera singer in training. And she helped me to learn to develop a voice, a little bit, you know. And then from what she taught me, I learned to throw my voice if I want to, which is a very helpful thing if you're teaching ballet, and I didn't have that before. I could stand later, because I was teaching at the University of Milwaukee, University of Wisconsin, the Milwaukee campus. I was on the dance faculty for a while there. And I could stand at the back of the biggest studio and boom at the people in the front, just because I learned to throw my voice, develop a voice. It's funny, those things you don't think about. You know, the dancers, they mustn't talk. They're not, they talk with their, well, here I am flapping my hands. And that's it. So then I gradually moved out of it, and then of course the family. And then Ken went to medical school, and that's when I was teaching at the university. And then Eric came along, and during all those years, I was a Cub Scout leader, and I became interested in amateur radio. I was, for 15 years, very active in amateur radio. I was using CW, or Morse code, and it was a marvelous hobby. Even when I came to South Africa, I was still on the air for another 3 years, really. Yeah. And then I just kind of lost interest. If you're in a new country, you're learning a new country, I don't know, you start out new. That's how it was. Yeah, and then and I met Vidi on the air using Morse code. And he and I didn't even hear each other's voice because it was all dots and dashes for a long time. And then he decided to come to the USA to visit his ham radio friends, and that's when I met him. And he liked country music, so we took him to Nashville. I'd never been to Nashville. But I think I actually liked Nashville much better going in person to see the live show than I didn't care for it on the radio very much. But then it was a couple of years later, really, we stayed in touch, and then I went over to South Africa, and we were married in 1996, the end of November. And it's been a very nice time in South Africa. We're both retired. We don't keep much of a schedule, no obligations or anything, which is kind of nice and restful. And I stopped teaching when I came to South Africa. Yeah, I was teaching in Asheville. I was teaching at Winston-Salem School of the Arts. I taught at the North Carolina Ballet Theater School for some years. I have students who are not teaching students, so that's okay. And my feet are tired. So that's it. So ask me, that's a general
That's great.
thumbnail.
No, that's great.
Of
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
what's been going on.
Wonderful.
I think,
All right. Well, thanks so much, Mom.
well, okay.
Right on. Yeah,
Fairly painless.
that was Mom talking about all of her stuff. And yeah, thanks for doing this. I know it was late, and we've been running
That's
around all
okay.
day, and this has
okay.
been just
If I
right.
can get my brain organized and do it.
I thought you did great.
Does it make sense?
I think so.
I hope so.
I think it was
It's time
good.
to go to bed. I have to go shower. I must go shower. We've got to be up at what, 4 o'clock tomorrow morning? Some
Yep.
crazy thing like this.
All right.
And yeah, it's nice to be here visiting. It's very nice to see Neil and Eric visiting together, and all of us to be in the same household. Rachma puts up with all of us, feeds us far too much. Jensine entertains us, and Vidi's just watching the whole crazy thing.
Yep. Alrighty. With that, I bid you good night.
Okay.